We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. Never in the history of America had we the people been completely away until December 6, 1865. On this day, we the people ratified an amendment, a major turning point in the history of America that established justice, ensured domestic tranquility, provided for the common defense, promoted the general welfare, and secured the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Up until December 6, 1865, blacks had been returned from their inalienable rights that were endowed by their Creator. Therefore, the 13th Amendment allowed all men their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As Abraham Lincoln began his second term in office, he started with the high hopes of ending the Civil War and enacting the 13th Amendment. He reasoned that the phrase, "all men are created equal," in the Declaration of Independence must be read to imply the injustice of subordinating one race to another. However, Lincoln was battling a war that was not just waged in 1861, but rather at the genesis of America. Slavery came with the birth of the New World, when the first 20 Africans arrived in Jamestown, Virginia. By that point, slavery was already an important part of the social and economic structure of the emerging nation. Hence, slavery would not only become an establishment in the colonies, but unfortunately, a mindset that would not easily be turned. As the colonists began to feel oppressed from the acts and taxes enacted by Great Britain, their anger started to build and their pursuit for freedom from their mother country began. At the heart of this revolution's language and ideology was the notion of liberty. Unfortunately, the war for independence was not inclusive to all people.
Draft of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson denounced slavery. Various reasons for doing that, but all 5 members of the drafting committee of the Declaration agreed with that denunciation.
However, the new nation was not ready to turn the tides both on independence and slavery, since many of the founders understood that slavery was a necessary condition for the Southern economy. Therefore, all men are created equal would have to be pushed down the line. The spring of 1787 was no harbinger of nature's reoccurring cycle. For young America, it brought the seed time of national destiny and a new era for mankind. The moment when the heritage of a culture became the promise of American life. The delegates would take on an auspicious task of creating an American government, solidifying a we the people and contracting individuals to a national mentality. Yet, their promises that summer did not extend to slaves. The delegates did debate, but on representation rather than emancipation. It was in Philadelphia that summer that the founding fathers solidified a we the people, yet we was still exclusionary.
That cannot be compromised. And if we try to compromise it, there will be a war, and so we're just going to kick it down the road and let the next generation deal with that.
It was through this inability to address slavery that allowed for it to become the founding sin of the Constitution. With the 3/5 compromise, slavery was once more passed on to the next generation and disbarring the we the people. As the mid-1820s brought the North to begin passing personal liberty laws, the Southern states reacted with anger and frustration. This notion of slavery, being a local problem and not a national problem, entrenched itself into the fabric of society. As the United States continued to expand, the ever-growing question of slavery continued to extend westward. Counter-compromises, such as the Missouri Compromise of 1820, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 were used to keep a fine balance between pro-slavery and anti-slavery states within America, but to no avail. Eventually, as Abraham Lincoln foreshadowed nearly 3 years before the outbreak of the Civil War, a house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Just 2 years after Abraham Lincoln lost the senatorial race to Stephen A. Douglas, Lincoln and his former opponent ran against each other once again during the presidential race. It was when Lincoln won the presidency that the southern states developed concern for their slave-based economy. 3 weeks before his inauguration, Lincoln visited Independence Hall and there stated of his love for his country and its founding beliefs.
This is a weird thing he said before he goes to Washington. He said, "I'd rather be assassinated than lose the principle that's in the Declaration of Independence."
Lincoln strongly believed in the principle of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal was what this country was founded on. Shortly before Lincoln was inaugurated as the 16th President of the United States, 7 states seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. The Confederate States elected Jefferson Davis as their own president. It was through the attack on the Union-held Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861 that led to the escalation of the Civil War. As the Civil War progressed, the Battle of Antietam gave a significant turn of the tides to the war.
Union victory was Antietam in September 1862, and in fact that victory is what Lincoln used as the success he had been waiting for to issue the Emancipation Proclamation.
Only 4 years later, more than 620,000 lives were lost for the freedom granted of the people, by the people, for the people, that shall not perish from this earth. It was through this war that led to the unity of the United States of America and to the emancipation of all the slaves that were held in the inhumane bondage, and it was through all this that shaped it to its present state. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was enacted.
He claimed that power under his war powers as commander-in-chief in time of war to seize enemy property.
This document turned the tides and proved that the Civil War was now not just a war to preserve the Union, but to free all slaves and preserve justice and humanity throughout the land. After decades upon decades of suffering and debate, liberty rang on January 31st, 1865, when Congress passed the 13th Amendment. It was on this day that slavery was buried and the inhumane bondage that held blacks imprisoned was forevermore abolished. Shortly after the passing of the 13th Amendment, General Lee and his troops evacuated Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy, on April 2nd, 1865. The war for unity, the war for freedom, and the war for brotherhood was finally coming to an end. On April 9th, 1865, the commanders of the two armies, General Lee and General Grant, met and finally agreed on terms of surrender for the Confederacy. December 6th of 1865 brought forth the birth of a new amendment, an amendment that brought a world-shaping turning point, an amendment that brought a shift of tides in the Constitution and in the Society of America, and an amendment that broke the chains of the 4 million slaves that had been in involuntary servitude for 246 years. It was on that day that the 13th Amendment was ratified and changed America into a more perfect union of we the people.
You know, I think the most important legacy it left is it showed that the people of the country finally were living up to the ideals on which the country was founded.
The 14th, 15th, 19th, and 24th Amendments, which provided the fair and equal treatment of all, were a direct product of the 13th Amendment. Although the 13th Amendment emancipated the slaves, society did not turn. Instead, they found ways to subordinate and intimidate the former slaves, hardly giving new African citizens their self-evident inalienable rights. To further separate the races, Southerners constructed a vast network of Jim Crow laws and practices, which were not separate or equal. These requirements had disenfranchised all but a few blacks and completely brought the constitutional turning point to a halt. Until 1954, the notions of separate but equal had never been legally challenged. However, Brown versus Board of Education broke the doctrine of separate but equal and set the 13th Amendment's legacy back in motion. Leaders such as Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and others stood up against the brutality and formed the civil rights movement to preserve the privileges of the African American citizens. The 13th Amendment, an ideological and social turning point that led to the fair treatment of all people in America. The abolition of slavery marked a step toward the formation of the perfect union set forth in the Constitution. Without this amendment, there would be no shared events, no shared history, and no we the people.